By now, the developers over at Milestone have proved themselves to be masters of the motorcycle racer, but I've always had a slight sense that the MXGP series has been where its creative heart lies most. There's simply a lot more fun you can have with a game based on the MXGP and MX2 bike categories compared to conventional MotoGP, not least because of the extra dynamism of tracks and the slightly different terrain types to have fun with. This remains the case for the most recent effort MXGP 2020, which may have already released last December on last gen systems, but is now ready to let players tear up the track on PlayStation 5. I'm Aaron from Console Deals, now let's get into why. The first thing to say about MXGP 2020 is that it's very much a faithful simulation of the Motocross Championship experience. Because while there's always the temptation to just hold the trigger down and do your best to reach top speed while on a straight, not knowing when to appropriately brake or shift your weight on the motorcycle will almost certainly lead to a crash. Luckily, as is the case in most Milestone racing games, the rewind feature is baked into MXGP 2020's career portion and quick race modes. This can be activated at any time to attempt to turn or jump more correctly, and is still the best learning tool for those new to simulation racers entirely. I say this because if there's one thing MXGP 2020 does poorly, it's onboarding. The career mode is surprisingly sparse in terms of content and depth anyway, but all the game does to tutorialise you into how racing works is pop the controls on screen during your first couple of races. Plus, because there's no racing line available for first timers to stick to, at times it can be all too tempting to just rewind on the same section of a track until you get it right. The ultimate goal though is to get through a championship without having to use it as a crutch. Luckily, MXGP 2020 presents players with a whole suite of options to let you tailor the experience exactly to your tastes. The difficulty level of AI racers, for instance, can be set either at very easy all the way up to hard, and you can set the gear shifting to semi-automatic or entirely manual. I'm admittedly a casual player for racers of this type, so I appreciated the ability to tweak such incremental settings in there. MXGP 2020 can be as deep as a racing simulator as you'd like, and that's a good thing. Leaning on the more playful side is MXGP 2020's Playground mode, which, as its name might suggest, is an area where you can just roam around a plane of land and get to grips with your motorcycle. In this year's iteration, the setting just so happens to be a Norwegian fishing village, which is just as tranquil as it sounds and features a wide variety of terrain to tear up and skid upon. It's also here in Playground mode, where you can undertake what are known as waypoint races. These act as player-created routes that have been uploaded online and take place on the large-ish map, challenging you to race from point to point without knowing where the next waypoint might be. It's a fun, if basic, distraction from the career mode. Speaking of which, progressing your custom driver's career is a relatively straightforward affair, tasking you to work your way up the championships whilst taking on different sponsorships. Placing highly in races when under these sponsorships will see you earn more credits, letting you unlock further customization options for both you and your bike. Just bear in mind that when under contract, you can only don specific colours, the ones they dictate. The simulated version of 2020's Pro Motocross Championship won't surprise veteran petrolheads with its career mode, but all the season's tracks offer great variety and look stunning, especially when playing on PlayStation 5. This brings us to the features specific to this next-gen version of MXGP 2020. And first, as you might expect, it quickly claims the title of Best Looking Simulator Motorcycle Racer on the platform, albeit that's not saying much right now. The game does, however, support full 4K visuals and dynamic HDR for TVs that support it, and load times between races are now incredibly fast. It helps that menus are also a breeze to navigate. I still think Milestone on the visual front could do more to improve the look of crowds and human character models in general, but bikes are what they do best, admittedly, and the MXGP and MX2 class vehicles all look great. The real boon of this PlayStation 5 version is the haptic feedback support, made possible with the PlayStation 5's DualSense controller. True, it may still be a novelty topic that won't concern many racing fans for now, but it's clear that Milestone has dedicated a lot of time to replicate how the bike feels and translate that feeling into the palm of your hands. The rumble of the engine is always present, for instance, but when taking a tight turn, or if you get caught up in a wheel spin, you really feel the difference with a more intense rumble. That's not to mention the R2 trigger's adaptive resistance, which continues Black Ops Cold War's penchant for altering tension, this time depending on how hard you're turning your bike's throttle. Overall, MXGP 2020 might not be the great coming out party racing simulation fans likely wanted from the first next-gen genre entry, but its slightly enhanced visuals and excellent use of the DualSense haptic feedback easily makes this the definitive version. It's unfortunate that the career mode is light on all-round flair and polish, yet this still doesn't take away from the act of tearing up varied terrain as part of the 2020 Motocross Championship. We give MXGP 2020 a 3 out of 5.